request $3,500 for next year, and I'm just calling it grant match because we have been tentatively approved for a wildland grant. It's a matching grant, 50% matching grant through the state for $7,000. And it will probably be signed sometime after July. Well, I know won't be signed until after July 1, but it's 50% match. So that $3,500 will pay our share of that grant. And that's going to be for some hose and portable fire pumps, which based on the weather the last few years, it's something that we really should be investing in. My budget's roughly pretty close to 50% spent at the moment. We do have some larger items that will be coming up later on in the fiscal year for us, but I'm kind of waiting to see equipment purchase, things like that. We'd rather do towards the end of the fiscal year. We will have some more vehicle maintenance and station maintenance coming up as well. So, no, not quite at a half spent. So we're well on our way to getting there. Any questions about any of the budget items?
For those, just 1 second, for those people following along at home, our fire department has requested a budget of $52,200 for $1,050 increase at 2.05%. Just as a reference point. Okay, any questions for the chief?
I have a question, Chief,
Yeah.
about vehicles.
Certainly.
We have a pumper truck and we have a rescue truck or an ambulance.
We have an engine tanker, so it's got a large water tank on it and it's got a pump, so it's like a fire truck with a large water tank on it. Our newest truck is what we could typically classify as a pumper. It's got a 6-person cab. It's the most modern truck of the fleet. Our oldest truck is a 1989 International. It's a conventional cab, so it will seat 3 people in the front of it. That's the stuff that the fire service is trying to get away from because they're not as safe in emergency responses.
I haven't looked at the capital planning, but are we planning for a purchase of a new vehicle?
That's something that Fred and I will have some conversations about in the coming weeks. There's a couple different possible directions we can go with a new purchase. We are gonna have to start looking at replacing the oldest one sooner or later. But it's gonna require some more logistical planning as far as what kind of direction we want to take our equipment in. One of the things that I and some of the other officers are considering pursuing is something that the service calls a mini pumper. So will be much smaller in size, carry less water, but carry a lot of the same equipment and be available to respond to a broader array of incidents. So like something that we could take out on Route 91 for car accidents or respond to hazardous situations, power lines down or gas leaks or something like that, maybe more storms and things like that.
Yeah, I asked because I read a very disturbing article about the availability of fire engines.
You saw that one too.
In Los Angeles, they have like 40 freaking ladders just sitting there. Meanwhile, the city's burning up.
Yeah,
And of course, we're not going to be in that situation, hopefully.
right.
But, it's, the increase in price is largely due to the consolidation of the manufacturing of fire engines.
Correct.
It's driving the price up
Yeah.
considerably, so I'm hoping we don't get caught with our.
I think things are probably gonna get worse before they get better, but things will get better because the way the market is right now for fire apparatus and ambulances, it's really untenable. The
Yeah.
trajectory that it's on right now is it's not good.
Is there any chance of sharing a pricey vehicle with a neighboring town, or do we just rely on mutual aid?
This is one of the conversations that Fred and I have been having a little bit of on the side, and we'll sit down and really hash out some more of it. But it's something that's, every department nationwide is dealing with
Oh, yeah.
right now. And there are certain things that we will, rely on mutual aid for. But sharing a new fire truck would be problematic on a lot of fronts. It probably logistically wouldn't work. But one of the things I did want to touch on before we move on to the capital is we had a particularly busy year last year. We did 131 emergency calls. Our department was able to cover 100% of those calls. Meaning that our personnel, we had somebody from our department on every one of those calls. Typically, smaller towns, call departments rely on mutual aid for at least some of their calls for primary response, meaning they just couldn't get a crew together.
Yeah.
So we were very fortunate that our fire department members last year really stepped up and responded to a lot of calls.
Right.
Of those calls, there was 12 that were medical only. The rest of the calls were fire or motor vehicle accidents. There was a total of 23, 26, 29, just about 30 motor vehicle accidents that we responded to last year. And the majority, the rest of the calls were either weather related or fire alarm fires. We responded to 12 incidents that were coded as fires, according to the fire reporting, national fire reporting. There was 8 structure fires we responded to. We had 3 structure fires here in town, so our folks were pretty busy.
Good.
Yes,
How many people do you have working with you?
we have 15 people, and we have probably 10 people right now that are very active.
Are they volunteers or something?
They're call.
That
So
what-
they're classified as call firefighters. They'll get paid for the times that they're responding. We pay them for training as well.
Just got a question, JP.
Yes,
In the past, were firefighters responsible for their own uniforms or turnout gear? Is that?
they were never responsible for their own turnout gear. In the past, the firefighters association has paid for some of the uniforms that people have worn,
Okay.
like parade dress, things like that.
Okay.
I do think that it is something that will be money that will be well spent to improve the professional professionalism.
Sure. Okay. Are there any further questions regarding the line items for fire department budget? We're good. Okay.
No,
Okay, you got the capital?
I do. So the capital project that we're requesting funding for is replacement of our air packs. We did a presentation last year, kind of showing the differences between the new air packs and what we have now. Our air packs are 23 to 25 years old, which is really, it's older than pretty much anybody around. Most of the departments in the county have gone to higher pressure air bottles and a more modern system. It's got more safety features built in, they're more reliable, and there's better interoperability between departments. Right now, if we were to go to a fire and we wanted more air bottles that we had on our truck, we wouldn't be able to get bottles because the bottles aren't compatible with what anybody around us has.
Right.
So that can be kind of problematic in and of itself. Right now, we have 2 packs that are out of service
Yeah.
from the last fire that we had. Things like O-rings are drying out, the regulators aren't as reliable, things like that.
No, I apologize. I saw the packet and I skimmed through it.
Sure.
Okay, but as I recall from last year, okay, didn't we have a discussion about a portion of this being paid for through a grant?
So I was hoping to get a federal grant last year. We had made it to the final round of selection for the 2 previous times I submitted grants to what they call peer review.
Yep.
So there was a stronger likelihood that we could get the grant. We didn't get it again last year, so none of this would be funded by grant. But
But
the
at
one,
the same time,
Yep.
didn't we put money aside in case the grant didn't come through?
No.
No, Fred? No? Okay.
The one good piece of news that I have for you is that if you recall last year, the request was significantly more money than what we're asking for this year. And the market has been pretty volatile. The price has been all over the place. The last set of quotes I got for last year for capital, the market was still recovering from supply chain issues, and one place that we're saving a lot of money on the last quote that I got is that the air bottles themselves are 50% less than they were quoted the previous year. It's a pretty substantial chunk of money. The only wild card right now with the quotes that we have is that if there are significant tariffs on imports, that could affect the price because the manufacturers have said that they're just gonna pass the prices on to us. But I think that the amount of $183,000 will, we're in a safe zone, even if we get some tariffs on things, we'll still be able to fund the project.
Do we have any questions?
Yeah.
Regarding the air bottles and the importance of having these available? Go ahead.
It's not regarding the air bottles, it's just regarding the
Sure.
quotes that you have here.
Sure.
There's one from a year or two ago from 181,000, and the most recent is 155,000.
Yeah.
You're requesting 183, what's the offer?
Because as I stated, I think that's why I think we're in a good spot with $183,000 to be able to cover the cost of the project, even if there is an increase on this latest quote that we got due to tariffs.
Okay, so you.
Because a lot of the bottles are aluminum, a lot of the components are imported. They're assembled, I believe they're assembled in the United States, but depending on how things shake out, the vendors are very reluctant to give a quote that lasts any more than 30 days right now.
Got it.
So I think that puts us in a good spot. While we're talking about quotes, I'll throw this out there. We have successfully written and been awarded a grant from the state for firefighter equipment, which we're gonna use towards turnout gear. That was $10,400. And there's a second round of grants, which with the board's approval, we're gonna apply for as well. And we can get up to, I think it's $5,250. And with that grant, we're gonna request command equipment for the fire department, so we can have better.
What's that grant again? For
The one that we were just awarded is the firefighter safety equipment grant.
Okay, and how much is that for?
Got the award letter right here, 10,400, I believe, is what we were awarded.
Yeah.
So it's not a matching grant,
That one's not a matching grant, no, it's a deficit spending grant. And the round two is roughly gonna be half of that. If we were awarded the maximum amount for the first round. And presuming we're successful with the second round, we should be able to get $5,000.
Okay,
We do have turnout gear coming up on capital further down the road, but I've been chipping away at the amount of gear that we'll need to replace on that, based utilizing these grants we've got in the last 3 years.
terrific. Okay.
Paul,
Good.
what would your estimate be of the useful life of the air tanks, either due to obsolescence as our current ones are obsolete?
Yeah.
Or due to the equipment just wearing out, need to be replaced?
Probably 20 years, 20 years max, 15 or 20 years.
I mean, is there a chance that they would be deemed obsolete in 5 or 10 because?
No, there's so many departments out there, there's so much of a need for this equipment that it wouldn't be obsolete that fast, but I would say probably 15 years. you know. Hopefully we won't go 25 years before we replace it. But yeah, it'd certainly be serviceable with 15+ years.
So would this, excuse me, would this come out of the operating budget or is there a capital reserve?
That's what we have to determine.
The capital request, yeah, that would be.
We'll work that out in the long run.
I mean, if you want to bump our budget up to 283.
Look at this
Well, it won't be done tonight. Let's put it that way.
All right.
It's a capital
Yes, sir.
request, not a budget request.
How many incidents do you have where the air tanks are used
Good
last year?
good question. I can tell you that obviously on all of our structure fires that were used.
And you had 8 structure fires.
Well, so we responded to more structure fires than that, but there were 8 incidents where we were actually wearing packs at fires. We've had carbon monoxide incidents. I can tell you that, 3 weeks ago, we had an incident where we responded to, report carbon monoxide alarm sounding, and there were elevated levels in the building. We had personnel, on air, at that incident. So, car fires, will wear packs. So in the last calendar year, there was probably, probably 15 calls where people were breathing the air.
Yeah.
But people will be wearing the packs when they're responding to a fire alarm call, because we don't know when we get there if, even if the homeowner's there, if we go look in the basement, if we're gonna find something in the basement. So the gear gets worn whenever somebody's going to a fire alarm.
I agree, it's a good investment, and
Yeah.
there's nothing more costly than a lost life.
For sure. For sure. Yeah.
I'm not trying to bust your chops here.
No, not at all.
Okay. Are we good? We good? Thank you very much for coming in,
Thank you.
explaining your budget. Okay, we are now moving on to the Recreation Commission. And we have a representative from the Recreation Commission. They're on at 6:35, which means we are 5 minutes ahead of schedule. Okay.
That's,
Thank you.
Okay,
It's about right
what
here.
do we have here?
I'm Chris Williams. I'm the rec director. This is Andrew Pepin with me. He's a member on our rec commission.
Wonderful. For everybody at home, this is our Recreation Commission here in Whately. They are requesting a 2026 budget of $18,360 for an increase of $3,800. Chris, why don't you run us through where the,
That was just the general expenses. The total budget is 27,148.
that is why we have a town administrator. It's just a little test, see if he's on his toes, and he is. Right, well, so let me reel that back, okay? Cut that out. They are asking for $27,148.13 for an increase of $6,469.13. That's a significant difference, 31% increase. And tell us where that money's going and what the increases are for.
Yeah, so going down, office supplies, that is an adjustment, that we are actually, we discussed. And we are going to put the office supplies back to 0 as it has been in the past, so that is an adjustment that we have discussed and we are looking to make. We went down in electricity due to moving to one account with the new work that the town did. Our building maintenance, we're asking for an increase in that due to, some additional maintenance that we plan to take on. We've noticed that we need to repair the siding that was just replaced. Because birds have worked their way back into it, actually, in one case, back into one of those bathrooms, that were recently redone. So we need to fix that. And then, another thing that we were talking about was, fixing and getting new picnic tables for the pavilion. Those are in pretty rough shape. So that is the reason for our building maintenance increase. As far as Hurley goes, having our budget increases at Hurley has been tremendous. I mean, you drive by and there's all sorts of new stuff always going on down there. Wayne's a great resource for us. The Recreation Commission's awesome, always willing to help out. So the reason for our increase this year for moving forward, a couple of projects that we're gonna focus on, is installing a parking barrier along the west side of the parking lot. That is something we had been discussing, and then as some of us probably saw a few weeks ago, the field was torn up by a couple of probably teenage kids, I'm assuming, but. So we wanna get on top of that right away, this summer, take care of that. Another thing we were talking about, was getting locks for the barn. We're talking about a new outfield fence for the softball field, the old PVC fence that's been around for a while and that's on its last leg. Also storage with new fences, you know, that'll be great for us as well. So much more convenient. You just roll up that fence. We have a little shed at at Frontiers baseball field. That whole fence goes in there in one little corner, and then we have tons of space for other stuff. We're looking to get stone bases for our sheds, both sheds where we got those a couple of years ago new, and it's time to get those up, so that we can protect those. And another thing that we were talking about is potentially looking into a snow blower to get for the ice rink down there. You know, when we have a winter like this, it is very challenging to keep that thing clear. So that was something we talked about at our meeting. That if we get the budget increase, that is something that we're looking to purchase as well for next year.
So that's in here, snow blower.
Yep. No, that is actually not on this list. I have it asterisk and underlined on the bottom handwritten.
What's the camera system? Really?
So we do not have a camera system at Hurley, which also was something that we've been discussing. We obviously did not get it in time. It would have been great to have that resource. Currently, we have some surveillance signs up there to try to deter people. And then also in prep for using some of the remaining budget this year to get a camera system with Whately PD. We've been collaborating with Chief Sabine on that.
Did you consider doing some of the snow blower, the fence, camera systems as a capital request through CPC? Right, because they are capital items, those shouldn't be in 1 year budgeting.
That is something that we had not really been looking into. We've been able to balance our budget while being able to get these new updates at Hurley. With our capital projects, we have a double lane batting cage that we'll be putting in. So that was one of our goals. And then for next year, our capital project goal is trees around Hurley, getting those planted. And then potentially we're also going to work on fence replacement along the riverside. So
that all sounds very good, but
Yeah.
it's a question of how they get funded. And if the capital improvements, they should go through CPC rather than through the standard budget process.
First it goes through them, then it'll come to us and.
Right,
And
but it wouldn't go in, it shouldn't go into your operating budget, which is what this is.
Because they're essentially one-off costs that you're not gonna, you don't, replace them every year, so you don't wanna see your budget, your operating, your general
Right,
expenses do
the
this.
12K that you have in here isn't covering any of those items. The camera, the fencing, the snow blower, et cetera.
We were planning to use that $12,000, yes,
Yeah,
not
that's
for
what
the
it is.
camera system,
Yeah.
we plan on taking out of our current budget.
So
and
is that,
making work.
is that why there's this $3,000 increase in the Hurley Heap Park?
Yes, our budget has, worked for us in, past years, and then with the parking barrier system, and also we were discussing the softball fence and the snow blower as well, and that was why we went up in that increase. I spoke with the CPC committee, last week, we had a meeting, the parking barrier was something that they could not help us with. Judy Markland gave a great, clear explanation as to why that I can't exactly recite perfectly. But so, yeah, like we are, when we have those capital projects, like, yeah, we are discussing with CPC. I'm on the CPC committee.
Yeah, not all of them would even, as Judy indicates, not all would qualify.
Yeah.
But they should still be submitted through that process rather than through your annual budget process.
Okay, understood.
Be an easier row for you.
Yep.
But also just to keep things straight, like repairing the building to keep the birds out should be in this budget.
Right.
That's a repair. Fixing up the field is a repair just to bring it back to
Yeah.
status quo. Anything new you want that's gonna be a permanent fixture should be in a separate request.
Yeah, we still have 5,000 pressure. For capital. For capital.
Yeah, but there can be things can be lumped together and.
Things, yeah.
So,
Okay.
So they could put the camera system and the snow blower together and take it out.
If each
That's
one
gonna
comes
go
in
over
under
5K.
5,000, they
And you
can
could lump.
get put together for one proposal.
so Chris, has Whately Recreation been infected yet by the pickleball-itis?
No, Whaley has not
You don't need to
been
go to court.
affected by that. I teach up at Conway, so, I see them in the gym, and I believe, we have some pickleball courts going in and, at Conway Grammar, so I am pretty excited about that. I get to run a pickleball unit, so that'll be pretty cool.
Only one to run 5 and 10.
Yeah, we have, yeah,
Okay.
major.
The other thing that we've been talking about in regards to pickleball is something that we are working towards is getting the property south of Hurley. And that will be, yes, a big capital project and all that good stuff. But just specifically in regards to pickleball, our goal, if we were to get that property, would be to put up an outdoor basketball court with pickleball lines.
That'd be great. Any discussion about acquiring the land between the dugouts and the road?
It's on the list, yes, that is, that would be great, because then we would technically be able to put dugouts there, but.
Right.
Yes, I do always get a kick out of that strip of land, but I will say, we missed Ralph. A couple weeks ago when those people were tearing it up, because he would have woke up. He
Yeah,
would have let us know.
absolutely. He'd have the crosshairs on.
Yeah, right, right,
Laser light.
yeah.
Well, look, before we wrap up, I just want to say that, I hear good things about you, okay, about the program, about, the commission, and, that's value to us. And obviously you understand the relationship between what happens on those fields and what happens at that school.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so all we would ask, or all I would ask is a personal thing, is that you continue to drive the good sportsmanship ethic with our kids.
Good.
And I would ask that you make sure no one stacks teams. No
Yep.
overzealous parent, one who wants to coach a team,
Yep.
tries to get his kid and his kid's friends or all jump on one team. That's not very good for what happens.
So I got a good story about that.
Yep.
Our grade 5, 6 teams the other day.
Yep.
Overtime. And then the Whately 2 team, which I gotta be honest, like, my money would have been on Whately 1. And Whately 2 got him, right, the buzzer, so
I know.
that was like a cool, that was a cool thing, kind of like some reassurance that like, all right, our coaches are.
Well,
They're doing
I
it.
gotta tell you, I was really glad they won as well. But had they lost, we would be having different conversations.
Fair enough.
Paul, I have one more
Sure.
budget question. You didn't discuss the increase in the coordinator's salary,
Yep, certainly.
43% increase.
Yep, so that is something, that Wayne and I, began talking about last year. Right now, currently, on a relatively regular basis, when I'm submitting my timesheet due to our budget, I'm leaving off time that I'm putting in, considering it as volunteer work for our rec department. The past 3 weeks, or past 3 pay periods, this one, I'm at 12 hours with 2 days to go. We got some more work to do. The one before that, 17 hours. And obviously we had the issue at Hurley that Saturday, which required some additional attention. That 17 hours does not include a trip up to the Berkshires for the sake of rec. And then the pay period before it was 12.5 hours. So based on our budget, it's 5 hours a week, and it's something I consistently go over, and that's without really initiative, I suppose, I mean, obviously
So
volunteering.
maybe I could jump in there, Chris. So I was supportive of that. That's not an increase in salary, that's an increase in hours. And what we're trying to do from a rec commission is, number one, benchmark against our peers, right? So we have, every town, as they say, a similar program, this is a rec director. For the amount that we do and that Chris does, and the amount that the programs that we have, we're a fraction of the hours allocated versus rec directors in the other towns. So this will still be significantly below what the other rec directors are. I don't mean to compare other towns, but we need to benchmark. We need to make sure that we are providing service that is competitive versus what the standards are. So, given that the number of teams that we have, number of programs that Chris is coordinating, I think it's warranted for the extra hours going from numbers 5 to 7, right, Chris? From 5 to 7 hours a week, still well below what the other towns are supporting. The biggest thing that I think I see is you want to use that time to continue to drive efficiencies. And make sure that we're ultimately delivering programs that are best in class in terms of cost and availability for the kids. And make sure that cost is never a barrier for participation in any of the township or anybody who wants to join Whately Rec. And I think Chris has done a really good job with not only the youth engagement, but community engagement. Just for example, we have 1st and 2nd grade basketball, right? Deerfield has 1 team. That's all they get out for coaches. We have 2 teams, and each team has 3 coaches. So continue to drive that community engagement. Look for talk with local businesses they would like to support Whately Rec, find other ways to support Whately Rec. Hurley is one of the greatest billboards that we have in the whole region, and different businesses I want to try to support, foster those relationships and look for better communicate that way. So I think that 2 hours a week is well warranted. He's already doing it, so just compensating for that.
Well, we thank you for your support of what Chris is doing. I just wonder why this doesn't go through the personnel committee.
It will.
Okay, so this is gonna
We're
go.
jumping ahead. The
Yeah.
personnel, any adjustments to personnel will go through personnel.
Okay,
committee
so,
first, and then
but
you're gonna-
my,
That was some good color.
absolutely. My recommendation is that, that emotion and that kind of support, is all anecdotal.
Yeah,
Okay, so I would recommend that all of that be put in black and white so that there can be a comparative, so that when the argument is made for this increase, you just go, here it is.
yeah.
Okay.
I
All
have
right,
another question.
perfect.
Yeah.
Sorry, before we
Question.
wrap up, about building repair, because Woodpecker's gonna pack. Are you looking at deterrent in addition to?
I think that's something we're gonna have to do a little research and maybe reach out to some people. I do not have an answer for that.
That's going, sustainably, we just can't do this every 3 years, right?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
then we need to figure out, there's some way somehow we can, the woodpeckers can get
All
in
you're
there.
doing is entertaining the woodpeckers.
Yeah, right.
I think you can hang reflective tape
Okay,
in front of the wall. I think you
Yep.
can also hang, common bird netting 3 or 4 inches away from the wall.
okay,
So they can't get to the wall, but do some research on.
okay, cool. I love those ideas.
Should help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead, Bob.
Just a quick one, it's carpenter bees that the woodpeckers are after. You got a pine siding down there,
Oh,
it's under overhang. You get rid of the carpenter bees, you won't have the woodpeckers.
get a carpenter bee trap and it's worked.
Well,
wonders
they
in
do,
our-
there's different ones out there, they're not that expensive and stuff, but if you get rid of. If you get rid of the carpenter bees, you won't have the woodpeckers. Yeah,
Great. idea.
that goes with anybody's house.
Yeah.
If you got if you got, carpenter bees.
Right after. We have
One more thing about, recreation coordinator expenses for 23 and 24. It's a very low. 0 for both years. Why was that?
We didn't have one.
We didn't have one.
Good reason for it.
Well, we had one the year before. Oh, no, we didn't.
And then we
The
didn't.
year before.
No, Christmas hire
Never happened.
taken on in.
Jonathan Edwards
Last year.
is responsible for those years. That's where we'll put it.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
right.
Just kidding, Jonathan, if you're listening.
It's not all we want.
I have a quick process question.
Yep.
Where does the revenue that the other towns pay to use Hurley here inside of the operating budget? Where's that picked up? Is that somewhere else that we'll eventually see?
Could you just repeat that question?
So if a team from Deerfield, from Frontier. They rent the field, from what I'm told, where is that money going? Paid to the town, or outside towns are paying to rent out field time.
Yeah,
Where does that revenue get picked up?
Do you have a revolving account?
yes, we do have a revolving account,
Okay.
but like with Frontier, we have a contract with them. I believe they use our fields and then
Maintain it?
and then maintain the fields as well, I believe. If there is money that Whately Rec is getting, we have not gotten it, so perhaps that's going directly to the town. Or I
It
don't-
goes into the town general fund.
Yeah, and I don't, actually, from a conflict of interest, I cannot, be part of those, contract discussions. I spoke with somebody, and I'm assuming it was from the state, a couple of years ago, just
That's a question
to
of
teach in the
the
district.
collector treasurer who was here last time, but it goes into the general fund.
Yeah, just piqued my interest on it.
And then when we have, like men's league baseball, uses the field, then we'll send them a bill, they'll send us a check, and that goes into our revolving account.
Great, thank you.
We have a list of, those accounts that we've used. Past, we have received that list and, how much was in each of those.
They're in your monthly. The monthly actual, the budget.
From the
actuals.
accountant?
Yep.
Okay. So it's available. Take the list.
Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Is just to double check, the numbers that you did submit, are you saying you just want to modify that office supplies to 0?
Yes, we are gonna.
But all
modify
other
that to
numbers
0.
stay,
And then the rest of the numbers, would stay the same. So our budget request, yeah, would go down to,
5?
Yeah.
Or drop of 500?
yeah.
Okay. Anything further? Thank you very much for coming in and explaining the budget.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.
Yep. I think we've got the best facility in the 4 towns.
I don't know if there's one better in Franklin County.
Absolutely. We're right with you on that. Okay, so we are, now,
Okay.
we are getting to
Oh, you, okay.
the schools. And we will start with Frontier Regional, which was at 6:45, and I apologize, we are at 6 minutes over. And,
Oh.
Yeah.
Bob, you give them a hand?
Sure.
Thank you.
Right.
Good evening, everyone. So, my colleague, Shelley Pareda, Director of Business Finance at Frontier Union 38, is unwell, is not well this evening. So I found out that this afternoon, so I'm gonna pitch in for her and try to get everything off tonight. But if there are detailed questions, I may have to get back to in a second, so I apologize.
Well, I hope she's doing well.
Yeah, she's been out the last few days.
Very glad to hear she's staying.
Yeah. So anyway, we're gonna start with Frontier, and then in between the two, I'll give you a little presentation on stuff that's going on in the school. So
Okay.
how would I present to folks?
Join the Zoom session.
Join the Zoom session. I'm not joining with my computer audio already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not here to play back.
That was our save time. Well, paper.
Really, increased office.
Sorry, I'm used. Zoom.
Just cancel that.
Yeah, but how do I get the bar off the top so I can access my tabs?
Did you have the launch meeting?
You know what I mean? Get rid of those.
Oh, you grab it and move it. It's not just, yeah.
Everything. There.
Hey Pete, can we project on that screen? Behind you? Not tonight, but just for future reference.
Differently.
Yeah.
White, you know, it was a word. Right. Yeah. See if it'll automatic.
So that will be there.
There you go.
I think it should automatically, it's always connected, but. Yeah.
Oh, we got it.
Yeah, I think it was that easy.
That's why our administrative assistant.
She's the.
Yeah, yeah. With sometimes.
Okay,
All right, so starting off with the Frontier budget, so where we are in the process there is we haven't had our public hearing on the budget yet, so this was the budget approved on the 11th to move forward to public hearing. So, they are still receiving feedback on that, and you're welcome to attend that hearing to get some feedback, should you choose.
make it full,
Um,
full screen.
Oh, he's asking to.
He's in a separate map. So, because, yeah. He wants the, full screen, he's got it in his browser, he can't.
All right.
Make it full screen.
Okay.
Paul, can you see it on the TV here?
I can see it, yeah,
I can see it up there.
Yeah.
Clearly.
It's the same thing, so
okay.
does what we're seeing on the screen correspond to anything in the handouts?
It should have been exactly what's in it, what's in it.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Truly, it's very good.
I should have got that.
Up the top,
Yeah.
I already scrolled down. a little bit. All right, look like that.
It's good, it's good stuff.
Okay, good.
Language is different.
I think we're good.
I'm not seeing that.
What the numbers are.
Yeah, the numbers are the same, it's not
The
the same.
explanations.
Okay, yeah, got that.
You guys all set?
Yeah, she may have,
Item number
Have an
4.
updated one from the today.
Yeah.
This is February 11th.
Yeah,
okay, she may have,
yeah, that's,
Sorry, well, I had a couple, the subtraction of the 2 or something like that didn't equal the real numbers right there.
All right, let's go.
Shelley did.
yeah, and actually, I didn't even bug Shelley today, I just went into my file.
The numbers were the same.
Yeah.
Shell numbers, yeah.
Okay. All right, so basically the budget presented before you today is a 3.32 increase over FY 25. And the 301,888 growth includes a placeholder for wage increases for teachers and instructional assistants, who we are currently in negotiations with, and also includes central office staff. So, and outside of that, the major changes in the budget are in those 4 categories you can see. Health insurance is a big hit of close to 175,000. As I believe you towns are also part of the Franklin Trust, which is an 18% increase in health insurance. So that's where you're seeing that big chunk in health insurance. Other insurance is $30,000, retirement contribution, $27,000. And I'm gonna be rounding numbers instead of using ones, because you have the document in front of you, and then an out of district placement cost increase of $12,000. So those are the major changes in the budget that brings you to the 3.32. There are no new initiatives in the budget. And there are no capital requests this year from the conservation. We're gonna hold those in-house as well. Yes,
On this out of district, is that students who go to other schools?
so those are students that are placed in other schools by our district, not students that choose. It's not choice or charter.
Right.
It's students who are, so if students have special education needs that we can't
Oh, I see. Okay,
service at the school, they will be offset, they'll be sent out. And those can round from $50,000 to $300,000 in placement.
oh, what? Oh,
$50,000 to $300,000 in placement, a single student. So going up to $12,000 is very small. It's just adjusting the budget as it's growing. And those keep on going up and up as well, the cost of those placements.
Alright.
So again, these are students that need either services that we can't provide or such intense services, and even residential services that we place out.
And how much did you say the range is again?
It could range from $50,000 to $300,000
Per student,
per student
Per year.
yeah,
per year.
yeah,
And day students could be $300 a day in transportation.
you have to transport them as well.
Let's just say we after. This budget is brought down by 2 funding sources, to bring it down to 3.32. We're using $100,000 of rural aid and $100,000 of school choice. We have just over $200,000 in rural aid. We're choosing to use 50% of that. It's our beliefs, that the rural aid is the kind of the state's attempt to give districts like ours some funding that's not coming through Chapter 70. However, it's not guaranteed year to year, so we're trying to be conservative in how we're using it. We're gonna use 50% toward the budget, and then we're gonna use 50% toward the capital expenses, and it's already been kind of earmarked to go toward the fire panel system that we're already, have already bid it out. That's gone up and up in pricing each phase of that. So, and then using school choice, additional school choice monies, there's already school choice in the budget, offsetting costs. But using about $100,000 there as well to lower that budget. Yeah. So again, if you can read it, reading it to you, but it's also for people at home, basically we'd be at 1.54 higher, a total of 386 over FY25 if we did not do that. Yeah, as I said, there were no new requests for FY26, and there are the numbers for the total budget with general fund, grant fund, and revolving funds of 15,541,404. Those are the, that's the total operating budget. Looking, it gets in more detail, the way she has it set up, is it kind of gives more overview, then it goes into the specifics of how the budget got to its at. So the historic data of this budget of what we've seen in past years, you can kind of see there, we're at 3.14 the year before, 2.92, 3.64. Your current enrollment, residents have stayed pretty consistent the last 3 years. You can see we're just under 430 students with a fluctuation of choice. It's gone from 189 to 167. That number is going to continue to go down. We have less.
No, I'm sorry.
Sorry. But I kind of put my eyes, so I wasn't really gonna hit. So that choice number is going down, and that number will continue to go down as Franklin County is shrinking, and also our sending schools are shrinking. And so the number of school choice of sending schools of the 4 towns, which the majority of our choice students continue on in our system from, is getting smaller. The main culprit of that would be Deerfield. They used to have 3 sections of 3 classes per grade level. They're now down to 2. And they were one of the major feeders of school choice into Frontier. And we'll look at Whately a little bit later.
Darius, at that number, what's our cost per pupil? Have you,
With that number, we're
420, total 596.
we're around 20,000. Just under.
And a school choice, how much do you have to pay?
School choice, so we will get $5,000 flat fee. And then any special ed increments on top of that. So if you're a student that, let's say, receives speech services, there's a billing rate for those services back. If you were a student that had more intense needs and had a 1-to-1, that would be fully reimbursed by the sending school district. So it's more than $5,000 because just about 21%, or a little bit higher than our Frontier, are receive special education. So 21% of that number in front of you is receiving more than the $5,000.
The choice that students have, is it just within these 3 schools, or could they, for example, go to Northampton?
So talking about Frontier Regional, the 4 sending towns are all members of Frontier Regional, so they would have to be from outside those towns.
So if a student went to JFK,
If they left us to go to another
Yes.
district, we pay out.
yes, and how much is that? Is that 10,000?
It's $5,000
Only
a
five?
student. And plus any special increment. If they go to charter school, it's $20,000.
Do you have any sense of what the exposure is relative to that?
Sorry.
Any sense of what the exposure, how many people are impacted?
So, you know what, I don't have that number, and Shelley would. The good news is that number's gone way down. And so our, in 2 years ago, that number dropped so significantly for going into last year, that's how we were able to pay off that was one of the major factors that we were able to pay off the loan for the track and the major improvements for $1.8 billion is because we applied school choice, a big heavy chunk of school choice, because the number of students going out went down. And that was one of the major components of why school revenue went up, because we didn't have to spend as much out that year. So, so things are going the right direction, less students going out. I think charter's lost some of its charm. It's not as popular, at least from our district, as it was for a while. And I think it's also because our schools have been in healthy shape. So when schools become unhealthy, start to look for other options, but we've been kind of running well for the last 10 years.
That 5,000 figure has been that much way for like 10, 15 years.
It has never changed.
So it's never been adjusted for inflation.
No. In Eastern Mass, doesn't really participate in school choice. Most schools are either don't opt in, or if they do it, there's very little movement. And it's really Western Mass and the Cape that are school choice. There's a lot of school choice movement, and we are probably one of the biggest winners in school choice in Massachusetts.
And of course, the flip side of that is places like Turner's is losers.
Correct. Correct. And so I say we're winners, there's gotta be a loser, right? So we're taking those kids from somewhere.
Yeah.
And we basically, take the majority of our students from the northern county. So your Greenfield, Montague, and then a smattering of, Mohawk, Pioneer. And then we get a few from South and a few from Amherst, but sometimes it has to do with people either working in the district or working this direction. We're looking for a smaller school.
But the understanding is that was why it was created to begin with. It was created to create an environment where you have the haves and the have-nots, because they couldn't control the unions.
Yeah.
So they would put choice now into the system. And if we can't control you, then either do well, or we're gonna put you out of business. And that's kind of what's happening. Out here.
I don't think, you look at choice, and if you were looking in a, kind of a city where you have multiple high schools, and, the idea of, or, schools that were failing, and, you want to choose your child to have a better education. It is kind of, in Western Mass, a lot of these schools, you start getting an exodus, and then you start losing programs, and then people start leaving the schools to chase programs. So if you want to be, athletics is easy, so I'll put something easy, but a little bit more, drama program. How many area schools are putting on 3 or 4 productions a year? We are, but others, you can't keep up if you don't have the base. And then you can go into the academics. How many AP offerings can you offer with more than 5 students in the classroom? You just don't have the mass to do that. And then also, we also build special, on the other end of the spectrum, we have special ed programs where we choice students in. So that, we build our own programs, so that our students don't have to leave, but you have to have a critical mass. If you're only educating one kid, you can't build a program. You have 3 or 5, you can build a program, so, we've done those things. So we're fortunate to where we are. We're in 91, we're an easy location to go to. We're a little bit further south. And so, we kind of won early on in the school choice game, and now we're kind of bigger winners because it's continued that flow. Should it be stopped? It's gonna have to come up from the outside, because we're just playing the game, there's, it was set up for us to play.
Just one quick question, not, our education in Massachusetts in secondary and elementary is funded by property tax, correct? Are there any states that don't fund their school systems with property tax because it's inherently regressive?
It's a good question. I assume there are states that do it differently. I mean, I know that there are different funding models, and Massachusetts is very complicated because there's,
I'll say it's complicated.
we haven't got the assessments yet. When I start talking about the assessment, you'll be like, I understand you only agree your budget this much, how come your assessment says this?
Right.
So let's get to that, then we can talk about that, but it is. The funding formula has been Band-Aid on top of Band-Aid rather than retrofitting the whole thing, because there's not politics to retrofitting the whole thing, and they're talking about opening up chapter 70 right now. There's a couple of bills out there just to have a discussion about changing the funding formula. But everybody, if you change it, there's winners and losers, and so it's where the politics are and all that, so
we know where they are.
yeah, so let me get to the assessments, because that's kind of the
Can I do a quick follow-up question about funding? So am I to understand that there is nothing coming from the federal government that runs our schools? I'm curious if we're in any kind of a vulnerable position with the changes that are going on.
Yeah, so federal funding, yeah, it's a good question. The federal funding, mostly is Title I. There is no right now, to talk about changing that. That would decimate the cities and whatnot. And
What is Title I again?
Title I, is, for math and English for students low, basically based on low income.
Okay,
And so we do get some Title I monies. It pays for, I think, a teacher and a half, it mostly goes to salaries. And that was a guess where we're at, but it's not a ton, it's probably around $100,000. And then for the elementary, it's even less, you know, that kind of, if we qualify at all, really. So that's kind of, a lot of federal funding does go into the Department of Education and then gets to us in other grants. So sometimes we don't know that it's connected to a federal funding thing.
yeah.
You know, like we have a Safe and Support Schools grant, it's like for $10,000. Some of that's federally funded, but to what percentage, we don't know. So if they were to cut that, there will be a ripple effect, but it's not as cut and dry as saying, oh, that's federal money, and then that's state money. Sometimes it goes into state institutions and then distributed.
Right.
The one thing is that if they, you know, I went to a conference because we were talking about this, about the federal funding, and you know, they shut down the Department of Education. They're gonna have to figure out the funding somehow, or else none of the senators or representatives are gonna get reelected. And they're gonna lose control of the House and Senate. So, because their constituents are not gonna allow them to pick up the bill of everything shutting down. So there's going to be a ripple effect of correction at some point of those concerns. So just, I'm not saying that's the way it's gonna happen, but there is a checks and balance of the writing that those folks have to get elected into those positions. And if you cut all their schools' money, they're not going to get elected. Well, we would hope they would not get elected. I just want people to kind of think of that as, like, where's the checks and balance of where the federal government is heading when it comes to education? I'm hoping that's going to be it. I'm positive. I could be wrong. It's been surprising me quite a bit.
Are you working at all? I'm sorry to keep interrupting you. Are you working at all in Massachusetts to look at, well, if you say it's complicated where the money comes from, to look at where you might have vulnerabilities, to follow the trail back, so that you have some idea of what might be coming if the.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at it, it's like I said, in Title I and IDEA are the two major funding ideas. So it's just not, they don't do the major funding. It comes from the state and local contribution is what funds your schools. So it will have an effect if they give nothing, but
Yeah,
it wouldn't shut us down. It would, you know. Yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate that.
All right, so basically the Denver Town's assessment are state required contributions based on what the town can afford. Additional funding to cover the budget after the revenue sources are applied, capital project and debt service. So the 3 and 4, there is no debt, there is no capital project. So we paid off that debt last year.
Darius, if I can just interrupt for some people who haven't done this committee. The state required contribution takes into account a lot of things, including our assessments. So as our assessments go up, if we keep the same tax rate, we get more money, but it goes into, it makes us look like a wealthier town, and our school assessment gets bigger. Just, it's complicated.
Right, and it's a 13-step assessment. They figure, right, basically, if you have more money, the state comes in and says, of the 4 towns, who has more money, who has less money. So Conway, you'll see, I'll jump down to it. We were talking about assessment. Let's have the flow of conversation. Here's the assessment of this budget to the 4 towns. So Conway is at negative 11%, Deerfield's 4.5%, Summerlin's 9.3%, and Whately's 5.86% for $60,402. And so when we get the numbers from the state, we don't know if this is money in, money out for the towns. We don't know, in Conway's case, they've lost, which they believe they've lost some, because it also goes on income. And members in town, one factor there, they lost a couple millionaires, moved out of town, in a town that size, it has that effect. And so these are things that they're talking about at the state level. Small towns can't make the adjustment, you know, if you have somebody famous moved in town, buys a big house, and then decides to move 3 years later. The adjustment that hits you in the state formula is one person sometimes. So that's so I jumped ahead to the assessments here. I know you guys.
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to
But
make.
yeah, and please, thank you, Fred, for helping me out there. So. Yeah, basically that is the assessment of Frontier to the towns. And how that is set is also by the rolling average, and so here's the rolling average with percentage for the towns. You can see Whately dropped dropped 13 students in the 5-year rolling average. However, Deerfield and Conway also dropped students. So that's why Sutherland took a big jump, because they're a plus 18. So that also is a factor in assessment.
How does the future look for enrollment running into, running from the town into Frontier? Didn't we start to have here in Whately, like, we'll just call it a population boom, but we have, a robust, kindergarten, pre-K or first, second grade, my understanding.
So the numbers coming up, should they all come to Frontier, we have, next year's 6th grade class takes a dip. And is probably 20 students. We usually range between 100 and 120 students in middle school. And then the tech school will take about 15 of those students. We get around like 115, then we're down, we get to about back to 100. Private schools takes a handful or so, going into 9th grade as well. So your graduating class ends up between 90 and 100. That's been the running trend. There is a dip in 2 classes. The current sophomore class has a dip in it. And the current 6th grade class going in has a dip in it where those classes are going to be closer to 75. It does then bounce back up. And you'll see that we actually have another kind of boom in town where your elementary school, pre-K and kindergarten, pre-K rather, has 16. It's up a few. There's a little bit of baby boom coming through from COVID. I don't know what to say. I don't know.
COVID kids.
Right. Or as I said, maybe the masks didn't protect from. Yeah.
Do you have any concern, or is there any, relative to the kids that are currently in Whately Elementary that will eventually attrition into Frontier? Actually, yeah, attrition into Frontier. That there could be special needs that will become even more expensive to the Frontier budget down the road as the kids begin to age. Is there any of that?
So once they enter Frontier, we as a 4-town together own them and care for them. So in a way, if Whately had a higher needs student and they went to Frontier, it then becomes Frontier's problem. You get to share the cost with all the other towns. It does come back. We don't say, Joe Schmo here came from Whately, you own that cost of that student once they get to Frontier.
Right, but
Once they go to
it'll still be
Frontier,
inside the
it
budget.
gets divided up.
Right, still inside the budget.
Right.
So I guess my question is there any potential for that to increase on that side of it? We're talking about how expensive it was to take care of kids that you sent them out. Just wondering, is there any potential need inside the elementary school to eventually will attrition into the regional system at a higher cost level? It's not.
No, nothing that's because we have students leaving at the same time as well. So, Frontier has a pretty robust special education program. And we service many students to the age of 22. And state law is very firm. On your 22nd birthday, you move on. We transition services to other networks and that kind of thing. So students are also leaving as students are coming in, and there's no big. And every now and then Frontier may lose let's say a bumper student that's very expensive. But at the same time, it kind of evens out so far.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's a good question since look, are we monitoring how that flows through?
But
Given that negotiations are going on both at Frontier and 38, how do you arrive at the placeholder figures without giving away any negotiating?
We put one in,
What?
I take an educated guess. A gamble. So a gamble with your budget, right? So, you know, we gamble and I gotta put something in there to make a budget.
No, I know, but do you make it a relatively conservative in terms of the budget?
I wouldn't answer that question in public. You gotta trust me that number should work, right? And if it doesn't, then depending on how much it's over, depending on how much it's over, you know, we will have to adjust budgets with, it may only affect it in the elementary, it may only affect, it would be a smaller amount to it, it's a smaller percentage, but, it all depends, and it also is the realistic, certainly when we look at the weekly budget, it's the realistic constrictions of the budget. So if
Yeah, no, I was looking-
we not only can't afford it, but there's no way that,
Yeah, I was looking at the elementary school budget and looking at what the projected increase is. We don't have that breakdown for Frontier. Just looking at that and trying to figure out, okay, how is that arrived at? And the answer is educated guess.
Right, yeah, it is.
Very educated guess.
Wait, hope it's right. The only page I skipped over real quickly, which was important, is just basically your general fund budget and where those increases are going in each one. The decrease lines, I note that you're not cutting, we are reducing it by using school choice and middle aid prior to. So. Again, this is, Shelley Paredes sweet spot, she knows these numbers inside and out. So. If you do have, if you have questions on this and you walk away later on and you're like, you know what, you didn't answer this, or I'd like to see this, please just shoot us an email and we'll get you that information, or shoot us an email and if it's something you want to discuss at the public hearing. And as I said, that's at the bottom here, the public hearing is coming up. Is the 4th, March 4th is the public hearing, so we'll have that at 6 o'clock. And then followed by regular session, and then we vote the budget later that week. So we no longer do it on the same night as we have the town people's select board and finance committee asked for some pause there. But we do have to do it that week because our regional agreement says we have to do it. How many? 45 days before the first town meeting.
Okay. And that first town meeting is Sunderland then?
Yeah, Sunderland's on Friday and Deerfield's on Monday.
And our town meeting is
April
April
29th.
Oh, so you guys are moving back to the early spring?
As of now,
Hopefully.
Does that mean we're gonna be indoors? I like that.
I think that means we're gonna be inside this year.
If it's April. Equal showers.
I miss those outside meetings.
Well, it's that or May or June heat.
Yeah, right. Yeah, late June wasn't working either.
And you have to have this set by the 6th.
Correct. And so, all the, town committees have gotten a copy of it, and so we'll be, as you can see, it's while the assessments can go up and down based on that, the actual growth of the budget is, I think, certainly within, acceptable ranges. That's my perspective.
So our increase here for those looking on at home, who may or may not be able to see this. The cost to our town, town of Whately, has increased 5.86% for $60,402. And your total budget here is what number?
15 million. 15,541,000 right here at the bottom. 400.
$15,541,404. And we will be responsible for 1.039.
0.9. No, 1.09.
109.
1.09. For those following at home. That was kind of, you know, a good overview, a good, you know, let us see what's, you know, what the challenges are, and obviously what we're gonna be up against. Okay, questions? Any further questions regarding Frontier Regional High School or Superintendent Modesto?
I want to thank you for putting together a
Absolutely.
very comprehensive presentation.
And please thank Shelley for it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to something,
Yeah.
nearer and dearer to our heart, which would be the Whately Elementary School.
So I'm gonna give you guys a mental break by giving you a little slideshow presentation, because I was asked to say,
Okay,
kind of bring to life what's happening at the schools.
Yep.
And kind of give some data about what's going on. So starting with a couple slides from Frontier. You know, I think I call it the report card, you know, what's happening with our Frontier graduating class. And, you know, as you can see right there, 52% of our students attended a four-year college coming out of the class of 2024. 23% attended a two-year college, 1% vocational, 90% entered the market, 18 students were 90% into the labor market, 4 entered the military, 94 graduates last year. What does that look like over the last 5 years? We have the data going all the way back, but the last 5 years kind of give a snapshot. It's kind of a little drop where we were within four-year college. I think we have more students entering the labor market from that particular class. But if you look at the comparisons, what's happening in compared to the Massachusetts state average, you know, we're sending more students on as a college preparatory school than the state's doing. I just think that's an interesting report card.
yeah, absolutely.
I also have make copies of it for everyone, but you can pass it around, this kind of flip through. This is also a listing of all the schools that students are planning to attend and where they got into. So you can kind of flip through and you can see all the schools where the students are going next year. It was kind of hard to put on a slide, which is a list of, you know, 40-something schools. At Frontier, we also introduced something called Frontier Pathways, that to introduce real-world experiences to prepare them for the workforce. And it's called Pathways. And if you go to our website here, basically we have manufacturing, engineering, healthcare, and social assistance, criminal justice, global studies, and computer science and business. These are pathways to drive student interests at the high school level, to kind of direct them to kind of like take a little major, kind of put it in kind of layman's terms, like a major while you're at high school. So for example, if you wanted to go, you have an interest in going into healthcare, we basically give a background of all the different healthcare places and so forth. And then we give a recommended coursework where you have to take 10 credits, you know, 5 introduction to healthcare, but we are offering new courses such as health trainer, sports medicine, CPR, first aid, and then advanced courses. And you can look at those APs, biology, chemistry, physics, so that you could even go from just general healthcare or even pre-med. And so you can kind of look through the whole, you know, each one individually. I don't want to, you know, this is a finance committee and select board meeting, but we also are doing partnership internships with area businesses. And you can sometimes see Covestro, straight out of Whately, and other businesses in the area that are doing internship for high school students going from these pathways. And so we're always looking for more. So if you know connections out there that are interested in want to have one of these pathways and have connections to it, we do have a pathways director that would be happy to reach out and introduce people to more of that. New electives over the past 3 years, long list of them. We've been kind of shaking things up and keeping with the student interests, as well as feeding into our pathways program. So dropping off some things and adding some things, and many of these programs rotate. So what we do is we do them every other year. So that way You know, if you have a sports medicine, you know, with the number of students that we have, maybe you don't have enough to run that every year, so you run it every other year. So that, people who have, interest in doing that, that especially is important with our AP classes. We rotate our AP classes every other year, so we do two, you know, for sciences, we do two natural science, two physical science. And then swap them, year to year, so that you can take all the ones that you want to take as you go through. Right, so that was just kind of the quick overview of Frontier.
Okay.
Life at Whately, a lot of pictures, because it's an elementary school, and that drives the smiles. Basically, the overview, we do daily instruction of ELA, math, science, and social studies. We do have a strong social emotional instruction through second step. Physical education is kindergarten through grade 6, musical, general music, PK through grade 6, visual arts, kindergarten to 6, technology, grade 1 through grade 6, and library, pre-K to 6, all once per week, with physical education twice per week. We have global studies, extension from the classroom as well, kindergarten through grade 6, once per week. We have stringed instruments and band instruments that are available, as you can see there, for grades 3 through 6 and 4 through 6 for band instruments. And then we also have an obstacle course with a physical therapist, you know, with pre-K to grade 3 once per week. So working with those students there. I'm going to kind of go quickly through these. These are just things that are happening at Whately. Chrissy Curtin, your principal, put this together, and she's in Florida with one of your finance directors. Not with her, but they're both down there. So she can't. All right, so we have family dancing and arts night. You can see some people doing different things. Slideshow. You see kids on their campus. We do a very good, use a very nice campus, nice site. It's taken in the lunar eclipse, solar eclipse rather. There's a lot of cross-grade collaboration and learning activities across the grades in a smaller school. You do a lot of reading buddies and those kind of things happening. We also have community members coming in and leading activities. And I didn't place this person in there, just happened to be there.
Nice touch, though.
Yeah, if I knew what I was doing, I'd do it that way. They do an annual march. They joined Monty's March and do their own march to look at food insecurity in the valley and learn more about that, and really looking at each grade level, learning more and more intensity as they, you know, from 5th and 6th grade, really understanding what that means. They also do their own food drive. They work with the police department, the pack crews are full of food, you know, which is a real draw. Teaching staff, we do have a pretty veteran staff. With 21 with a bachelor's degree, 19 with a master's degree, and 2 with doctorates, with 434 years of teaching experience there. Let me bring an outside presentation. Here's the Tanglewood marionettes. We've introduced yoga to support self-regulation. And students keep their control of their bodies and minds when they are hyperactive, as they tend to be. Monthly all-school meetings are back. Those lost during COVID, where each grade level presents and controls the meeting, and oops, and look up, see faces may not. We do a lot of budget support, and I'm going to talk about that in the next slide. The needs of students are changing. As you can see here, the number of students with disabilities is on the rise in Whately, and this is according to our DESE profile. And you could say, what are the factors on that? Certainly, I think COVID has a factor on that. We are seeing more students diagnosed earlier with disabilities, and that's a good thing because it allows us to get earlier interventions. But it does have a major impact on our budget, and I'll be talking about that shortly. There are more students with higher needs staying in school districts, being identified earlier, and we're just kind of seeing that across the board. Special education costs are rising faster than other costs. They're doing field trips to New York. You can see there in the background. The theater, arts nights, so we do our performing arts with the and visual arts out of our classrooms. So the presentations. And then individual interests, sewing, great projects there. Also lock in civic responsibilities, including Memorial Day and Veterans Day assemblies, great photos there. Getting connections with the town and their veterans and their service. They also are doing a fundraiser with mom sales, as they're working with the school in Tanzania, with a former teacher who happens to be there. So they actually did a Zoom thing last week where they saw a former teacher, we connected both sides, they actually see their money that they raised at work. And so really kind of pen pals to the next level, with Zoom and that kind of thing.
I hope it's not a USA project.
Yeah, and then, you know, obviously, there's our mission statement, pretty big group. Alright. Alright, so that all costs money, so let's dive into that.
Let's go, we're talking money.
Yeah, right,
I'm
so,
looking at pictures.
you know what, I buttered you up with pictures of children, there is no
Well, here's the
no
thing
shame in
about-
school administrators.
You know, you're absolutely right about that, that we're here to look at the money, but if you step back and you say, you're gonna put your name on the line at an annual town meeting to tell the residents of our town that they should vote one way or another, what are they voting for? They're not voting for just numbers, they're voting for value. And what does that school represent? What do those two schools represent? They represent more than a dollar sign. And if you're gonna put your name behind the dollar sign, you should know why. And that's the why. Thank you.
So I'm gonna go quickly through the narrative part. You folks all have this copy correct, and you can kind of read through it. But basically, we have approximately 130 students. And about 80% are rated students, and the rest of 20% from school choice. We get those numbers and we get down below. Talk a little bit about the staff. And obviously, we pride ourselves in all that good stuff. I just want to get to the meat of it. So right now, we do have a public hearing on March 6th for this as well. So we're still getting feedback on this budget. And this budget does need feedback from you folks. You know, I do have some preliminary conversations with folks looking at the table. Talk about the difficulties of this budget. This is a difficult budget. We knew it was coming based off of last year. I'll explain what that means. So this is level service budget with some add-ons. And level service does not mean level funded, as you know, contracts and such go up. We review all the different funding, staffing, program initiatives, and building this budget. Shelley does a much better job explaining it, how you can get right to the meat of it. In our budget, the expenditures, so when you look at the budget sheets that were sent out to you, the line items, we categorize not by choice, but where the Department of Education says we have to categorize things. So as you look at the different areas of where things are budgeted, you know, why did you put, you know, school psychologist in that line and not the other line? It's because the Department of Education says that you have to code them under certain function codes. And she likes to explain that every year as they look through the budget and go through that and try to understand why there's certain growths in certain areas. So that's what that whole kind of page is about, talking about those different. The enrollment in the elementary school, you can see on this graph here. You can see the total enrollment's gone up slightly, residents have gone up slightly, and school choice is hanging about the same spot. And that's kind of a funky thing that we'll talk about, because when residents take the seats and we can't fill them with school choice, we actually lose money coming in from the new funding source. So you made me look like a question. So if we have, let's say we believe the optimum class size, which I believe is between 18 and 22 for an elementary school, maybe a lot smaller for the earlier grades, but let's say 4th grade. And we have 18 residents, but we only can take a few school choice students before we start to get too large. If we had 14 residents, we could then take 6 school choice students, and that would be an instant $30,000 increase from an outside revenue force to your budget, not including special education reimbursement. So it's one of those things we'll talk about when we, um, Chapter 70 funding, while Whately has gone up in the number of residents, it's not enough to affect us to leave hold harmless, which means we will only get the per pupil minimum aid, which in this case right now, the governor's budget is $75 per student. So the state is only going to increase its funding to the town for Whately, just under $7,000. And that's where it's broken and where they're gonna have to open back up, and look at that. So in looking at the history of chapter 70. If you go back. 2003, I think it was, they went into chapter 70 and they fixed the town side. Where the towns kind of won, the smaller districts won, in receiving more funding. Then, again, in the most recent, Student Opportunity Act. From the state, the cities are winning. They're getting all the money, the billions and millions of dollars that are going in, and the towns and the smaller towns are. You're going to see the next legislation kind of bring that back, so it goes back to towns, but we're kind of in that waiting period until that happens, so. Talking with the Taxpayers Association, who did they're an independent group that looks at the budgets of the state, they did a presentation, they kind of explained that, there's a lot of superintendents in this area are upset about the funding formula and when are they going to dive in and how are they going to change that, and they understand that the correction has to happen. They're saying the state understands the correction has to happen, it's just a matter of how we get there.
Is there a timetable on that?
It's the state. So it's right now, and so our local legislators are trying to pass bills to get that opened up and get it looked at. There are too many districts that aren't getting more money. The rural aid isn't enough. And so either, if they fully fund for rural aid, they don't have to open up chapter 70. But we'll talk about rural aid. All right. So the level service budget, going into the beat now, the level service budget reflects a 6.9% increase over FY 25. And that's driven by wage and non-wage expenses, but no new initiatives there. And the primary reason it's up 6.9 is that we're starting in a deficit of just about 3% at 2.92. Okay, last year we used ESSER funds to offset the budget of $40,000, just about 2%. And we did that because the transportation contract came in at 2% higher. So it immediately put us around 5%. And we had to get that down to 3% to be palatable. And we had the money to do it. But we knew when we did that, we were setting up this year to start in deficit. Yes.
Terrence, when you use an acronym like ESSER, would you explain it for
Sure.
home audience?
Yeah, ESSER is the Emergency School Relief Funding.
Sort of the education side of ARPA.
It's the ARPA funding, so basically it's COVID money that the federal government put out to the states. And ESSER money went to, was the federal money that went to DESE that then went to the schools. And so it was ESSER 1, 2, and 3. And we had to use the last of it up by September of last year. And so we used the last of Whately's money to offset the budget, because you could use it for anything. So thank you for the clarifying question. And any terminologies I use that are confusing, feel free to ask. The school budgets are complicated. And there's a lot of moving parts, revenues in and revenues out, not revenues out, but not expenses up. So additionally, early childhood revenue is hitting a shortfall. We have 16 resident pre-K students in preschool. That's up than we've had in recent years. Usually we've been able to take some people from out of town and such. And the factor is there's the number of students who are special needs in pre-K is higher. Okay, which means, and when you, for preschool, if you have special needs, you go to school for free. So we pick up that cost. There's no, so preschool is funded by usually tuition, except for the students who are, again, the special needs. When that number goes up, our revenue goes down.
Question about that, the tuition for the special education student in the pre-K. is it free for the entire program? Or is it just free for services, for special ed services?
It's free for the entire program. Um,
How much is that?
how much is the program? I think tuition's around $8,000 a student.
So your earlier chart had 25%, 1 in 4 kids are in that program, and therefore families aren't paying.
Correct. Correct. So when you add more students, when you have, so. And we wouldn't be taking tuition-free students from school choice. So that's why we're saying these are our students that we have to care for. So, if you were
I got it.
even, I'm just saying out loud for the, there's like, if you're in Deerfield and you school choice to Whately and you have special needs, you can't attend here for free.
Right.
So only residents attend for free.
Right.
And that's the idea, is to get early interventions, which make a huge difference, in the long-term success of the students.
So just to clarify on that, so if there's payment for the tuition, there's no cost inside the operating budget. But for the 25% of the population, the enrolled population, that cost is reflected inside the operating budget.
The operating budget for preschool is funded by the revenue from the tuition paying students. Okay,
So
until it can't.
does the revenue for the 75% increase, I'm sorry, the cost for the 75% that aren't going for free increase?
Correct. So let me just say it a whole different way. So in a good year, the revenues by tuition in parents into preschool cover the cost of preschool. Okay,
Yeah.
outside of perhaps benefits are still being paid by the town, the teachers and such. So there are still other costs outside of that aren't on paper, but aren't on our paper, but as the increase of students with special needs in preschool have that the amount of revenue we're bringing in goes down. The school then has to come from general budget to cover those costs. And we're seeing that shift now, $20,000 to less than that cost. And that could have, sometimes and this is where I need Shelley again, but we build up revenues and we can build up savings, and we slowly been working down some of that savings, but we want to leave some buffer in there, because collecting tuition isn't always a smooth, it's just like collecting taxes. Everybody is meaningful to pay their taxes, but they don't always do it. And so we have to have a small buffer in there so we don't go over budget. If we don't collect in all our tuition, or there's a shift from one year, an additional student moves to town right now, that kind of thing. That makes sense.
But as special education becomes more a part of our budget moving forward, this pre-K environment that these students are coming into, they are in the general population, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so in the course of a day, those students will be receiving education, programming, something as along with all of the other students.
Correct.
Their special education portion is now separate from, like, they're pulled out of the general classroom and like a remedial session of
They
some.
could be, so, they could also, there's a full range of disabilities,
Yeah, sure.
that one could have. I mean, it could be from simple, it could be relatively straightforward. Speech services, you're working on
Yeah,
speaking, language acquisition, that kind of stuff, to full behavioral where you need a one-to-one with somebody,
Mhm.
because without constant redirection, they can't operate in a normal classroom. And so they're teaching those skills, at that level. So, but they all, especially the earlier grades, if someone is developmentally delayed, or in any of those range things, they're going to need those services throughout. Very little is it like just one small thing. It's like you need the full day of services to acquire the skills, for the next level. And it's not gonna be solved in 1 year. It's something that's gonna go on, but
sure.
the progress you make in the earlier years gets these students really back on track where they're not gonna go outplaced.
Yeah.
And, receive less and less services as they get older. That's the hope.
You may have said this before, but how many students do you have in that preschool program?
Preschool program this year, 16 residents,
Oh,
Yep.
yeah,
no non-residents.
right. And how many of those will need special needs? Do you know?
You know, when I have that number, but not in front of me.
We have. Need 2 aides for school, right, for next year?
Right, we're gonna talk about that in a minute. So there isn't, he's bringing up the fact that we're asking for additional support for incoming students. That's a little bit further in the thing. And I don't have the number of the total number of students in front.
Is that paraprofessional line item?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, let me kind of go into that, we can talk about that, and then, so we're shifting funds. $22,000 of the cost of the preschool onto the general budget, so that's 1 percentage point right there, okay? Right, and then, some smaller growth of, salary increases to instructional systems, school-based staff, minor, adjustments of $3,046, and then we have a sick leave buyback obligation of $58,000. So, does everybody understand what the sick leave buyback in the teacher's contract is? So, we have since negotiated it out of the contract, since I've arrived, but, it is, basically a buyout of years of service in sick days, 2 per year for the number of years of service that, can average around $25,000 per retiree when they choose to retire their sick leave.
So if they didn't use it, at
Most
most
of them
times they
didn't
get
use it.
paid for it.
Yeah, and so that's why, so you have both retirees retiring here, that gives a one-time bill of $58,000. It's been a good practice to pull that out of the budget and pay for that using something other, either revolving funds, or in this case, we're asking the town to pull it out of the budget, and pay for it separately.
How would we keep track of that? As you prepare the budget, is there a placeholder for that? If it's not in the school budget, there's gonna be a 58K hit.
Correct. It would be
Is
a
there
warrant article.
placeholder for-
So it's basically a warrant article
On town floor,
on town floor to pay off the,
and we would indicate how that would be paid for
Right.
prior to that happening.
Thank you.
yeah. And this is, Deerfield has a placeholder because they're larger, it's economy of size, where they have, they have a sick leave buyback. $30,000 in their budget because they have about 1 per year due to their size of school. Whately is just too small in the sense of it's very similar to Conway and even Sunderland, where we've done this in both those schools where we pulled it out, and paid for it separately.
So if we pay for this separately at a town meeting or put it up for vote, what if it gets voted down? People don't want to pay for it.
Correct. Then. I don't know, I'd have to call them. You still are legally obligated to pay, so we would,
Exactly.
you would have to go back and either reduce the budget. To pay for it,
It's obligated, that's all.
and that's basically the start where you.
Right. No, I mean,
And
I
then
understand.
redo the budget and come back for another meeting,
Yeah.
it'd be a mess.
It would be.
It'd be a mess. That's why we really. I can't remember the last time we had pushback at a town meeting in regards to the budget. There are questions,
Yeah.
but we've really had to deal with that.
Alright, so. The new requests are for 2 instructional assistants for $66,000 for 3.21% increase. These are positions to meet the needs of IEP requirements. So basically, for those who understand what is an IEP, an individual education plan for a student with special needs. There's a process to be identified, to be someone who needs an IEP. So there's a process, a full team meeting with school officials, parents, outside consultants if necessary. Sometimes even physician recommendations and those kind of things. They all kind of go together to build an IEP. In an IEP, you could have something saying that this child needs a one-to-one. Meaning that in many cases, the behavior, it's usually behaviors or redirection that's needed. Or if someone was, let's say, mobility, it was in a wheelchair, you need a one-to-one IA for, depending on age and that kind of thing, and those kind of things change as it goes on. IEPs are reviewed every 3 years, and those things do change, but when then something like that is put in, and it's put in carefully, we aren't quick to just say, oh, just throw an IA on that. We are obligated to do that one-to-one support. So we have 2 students entering that require one-to-ones. So it increases the budget. We don't have 2 6th graders leaving that require one-to-ones. So if you had rotating now, we would just rotate that staff person. So either we add 2 staff people for these 2 positions, or we cut within to do those 2 positions. So that's kind of the difficult spot the school's in. And so therefore the request is to add to the budget 3.3.
Where would your cuts come from?
We would transfer from other classrooms. So we can't take away from other one-to-one required by IEPs in the building. So you would go to classroom assistants. To be blunt, you would start with the older kids and you would rotate support differently. And I mean, it's just, you have to get creative. And things we missed, you're gonna reduce services, because that's what you're doing.
Got a full-time position?
Yes, so that's 2 full-time.
Is it gonna stay there now, if we approve it, it's gonna stay?
Just for that student.
Or is this a 1 year?
No, it's a full-time position. That student gets that one-to-one for the 6 years they're at Whately.
Okay, so the job's there for 6 years.
Correct.
2 jobs there for 6
2
years.
jobs, and unless the student changes residence.
And then what happens when they matriculate into the high school? Those services
It follows,
It follows
right?
the life.
But the plan, not just hoping, but the plan is that you get those services early, that there's less and less need. There's also, those services early, it also evolves the other way, where early on, just to kind of, and I'm not talking about any cases in Whately, this is in general. In fact, I don't know the intimate details of those cases, but, early intervention, you are trying to put that in so that they do stay in your district. After a few years, the developmental level, a 5-year-old to a 10-year-old, you then see at that point, are they able to continue in, supported mainstream education of our elementary schools, or do they need a program? And then that educational team's going to decide if they need a program. Now, the first thing we'll do is, what do we have in-house, or what do we have in our district that we can do? And then on top of that, it could mean that that student has to go out and be placed out, and that's where you're talking about, you're gonna go from $33,000 to $100,000. And that could happen in 2nd and 3rd grade, because that's when you start to realize, that's when you start, reading, and that's when everything kind of picks up, and you're hoping that, the interventions you did there, because that's the need, is that you're able to keep them in school, in your building. So it is, the idea within special education is you want to keep them in your district, not only financially, but, parents and kids want to stay in their hometown. They don't want to be going to West Springfield on the van.
But also, as you indicated in the frontier discussion, when they get into frontier, then it gets divided amongst 4 towns. It's no longer solely our responsibility.
Correct.
But the needs could be higher and more.
The needs could
They
be
get
higher,
more,
but
they do get more expensive.
they'll get more expensive, but they're getting divided out of a bigger pool.
But some of these children,
Yeah.
could improve too.
Sorry,
Some of these children could improve.
absolutely will.
Yeah.
Yes, no, absolutely will. And that's why we do it. But the needs are also higher, so it's not, it's in a small school, it's time and place, it's what your community, is giving you for students that particular year, you know, so you get these bumps that can offset your budget. I mean, you could, it's happened in communities, there is bailout for the first year, if someone was to move into our community, the state helps you for the first year. But you can have people that move into your community, just talk about the politics of it, how it works, is that costs over $150,000. And that student never steps foot in Whately Elementary, but you're paying the cost of it, because the family lives in your district. You know, so those things do happen too.
Yeah.
I won't get into it, but it is the realistic, it is the thing about special education and how it impacts budget. Wow, this is, Shelley at least is a lot more succinct to that. Putting this all together, the level service budget with new request outline results in a general fund of $2.2 million. And an increase of 10%. Or 207,785 over last year. And so that doesn't include the sick leave buyback on top of that. So we recognize that as well. We're not hiding that, we're funding that a different way. So you're really talking about, 3% is more, you're really at 13% total ask by the elementary school.
Yep.
The visual breakdown of operating costs, after we're kind of at that sobering moment of where that number is. You can see the majority of our costs is going to instruction, as it should. And just a breakdown of the other ones. Benefits is very small because the town gives it benefits and it doesn't come up on this graph.
See, I have just a general, well, not a very specific question. When you look at section 2305, this is on the line item, teachers, classroom, and total is an increase of 76,597. Right alongside that is the school of choice number 165. How does that play into? Is that what we're getting from school of choice, and will that offset that cost?
No, that's not. I don't know where you're looking at, sorry.
Paul, that's on top of what we're, the budgeted number. That's, so in that line you're talking about, it's 466. That'd be plus 165 additional will be paid out of school choice money. I understand
That's what I wanted.
It does not offset that 466.
No.
That's the revenue, right, that's the revenue side of that,
Right.
of that line. Because that's where school choice, that's where you're seeing the school choice money coming in.
Okay. All right.
And then we decide where to apply that school choice.
Right.
And the reason why you don't apply it dollar for dollar and year to year is because that can go up and down.
Mhm.
And if it goes down, that school choice number goes down, and you start your school year off. Then you're in a deficit and you're cutting on day one because you can't make budget.
How much advance notice schools expect to get from prospective special ed students? Like, can somebody just show up the day school opens and say?
They show up in a year, and it changes. So, you have let's say you have a child, okay, been struggling, you got a third grader who's been struggling. Their new reading units are coming out, everything kind of, beefs up in third grade. And you're like, there's something going on here, I need the school to take a look. So you ask for an evaluation, we evaluate, and we say, yeah, your child has dyslexia, okay? And so we need to put them on an edge plan and start doing interventions to help them read. Now, right there in third grade, we're gonna meet the, but now there's an additional cost. Now we gotta schedule that student for additional resources, and that would just be real, and that does happen. That's what it's there for, right? And hopefully we're screening, and we're trying to screen that earlier and earlier, so you're not waiting to third grade to realize that there's something going on in the processing of reading and acquisition there of learning. But that's how it works. And so it does change from year to year. You also, and this is also does happen, middle of the year, the team decides that the student can no longer be in this building. and needs to go to another setting, we can't either control the behaviors or, their students regressing. And then they get placed out middle of the year, and that's where, you know, we would, in an emergency situation, apply what we have for school choice, any remaining special education funds, that kind of thing.
So there's been no rationale then, when it comes to the pre-K special IEP student who requires this special attention throughout an entire day versus another student who requires special attention for an hour and a half. Because we want to bring somebody in and when you're gonna give, so there's no delineation between those two. These parents don't have to pay the $8,000 and these parents don't have to pay the $8,000. That's how it is?
Correct.
Wow.
Correct. There's no needs-based within the identification of special education. However, at the preschool level, those in an IEP, there are going to be more students in preschool that are going to be on an IEP than that you get the original snapshot of a 3-year-old. So if you're taking the snapshot of a 3-year-old going into preschool, 3.5, going to preschool, you're seeing, even before that, because they already get interventions prior to that now. Those are the positive things that are happening in education. Normally you wait until they're 5 or 6 and also they drop it, they come the first day of school and you go, you're already behind, that kind of thing. But it's a different kind of intervention than, the example I just used, your child suddenly has been diagnosed with dyslexia. It's a much higher, they're not just seeing a problem with reading, they're seeing behaviors, they're seeing, self-control, that kind of stuff, which is more likely to be a one-to-one kind of service. And not everybody who's on IEP needs a one-to-one. There's other classroom IAs that can help support, right? So, getting someone settled, you can get 2 kids settled, there's a range there.
I know that there's a.
But the range, we want that child in school, and that's kind of the number one thing, like, we should be doing universal. We were in a perfect world with no economy, we'd be saying we should be doing universal free preschool for all. We want all your kids in school as soon as they are able, because we want to start that process. But this is kind of the fix to that, saying that I can't afford it, I don't send my child to school. It was actually cost school more in the long run, if we don't get that intervention early. So, but I hear what you're, I hear what you're saying, that's a good question.
But how many special needs students percentage-wise tend to require one-to-one?
Very low. Very low percentage, I would say.
Where I'm coming from is looking down the road at how we're gonna fund this. If we fund it essentially as a capital thing, in that we're gonna have this for 6 years.
You're only for 6 years.
No, I know we'll have it for 6 years. What are the chances? There are chances we will have it beyond that. I mean,
You won't, Frontier will. Oh, but you're saying more students coming in, right?
Right.
So you do have other students with one-on-ones in the building already.
Okay,
So they will graduate out and free up that
okay,
thing, and so what we try to do is on those, we will reduce staffing, usually. Within the instructional system positions, there's enough turnover, you don't let someone go, I don't want to fire anybody, but there will be the reduction there.
I'm just trying to get a feel for how many one-to-ones
Is
there
this gonna
are. Is
escalate?
it unusual to have to hire
It is unusual to have to hire 2
in 1 year?
in 1 year in a school this size,
And-
with none going out. Normally you have a few,
Yeah.
and there's turnover and that kind of thing. This is, you have a large resident class
Right.
with some needs in it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, is this something
Yeah.
we should be, putting in the regular budget because we will always have these 2? Or after 6 years are they gonna disappear?
It's tough. I couldn't tell you.
I know you can't predict the future. I'm just trying to get an idea.
So-
Like you say, the number that need one-to-ones is quite low.
But if a quarter of the kids in Frontier have some sort of special need, and I think that answers your question. what's gonna happen to population.
Well, so special needs and one-to-ones are not the same thing.
Right, so
Right.
like let's say this, let's look at this like 7th or 8th grade class, you're correct, about 25 students of the 115 are on an ed plan.
Yeah.
1 or 2 have a one-to-one. And we have some significant programming there where we're taking students, you know, who are in a completely, they can be made sure that's possible, but they're receiving a substantially separate program for their education. So there's some intense needs.
Yeah, there are lots of students that have IEPs and
Right,
have IAs attached to them, but they're not one-to-ones.
correct. Very different. Again, we're kind of Paul was saying earlier that full spectrum of need. We still select everyone they're younger though, just that, you know, you're not gonna know math disability, you know, at 3.5.
And last question, well,
Really?
are we hanging on to our half-time math interventionists from last year?
It is in the budget, and that was discussed at the last school committee meeting. The administration at that meeting proposed to pull it. The school committee asked to keep it in, and asked for us to give some information on what's going on there. And I have some of the information tonight, and the school committee hasn't seen this yet. But we are seeing significant improvement in math scores every week. And the question is it causation? What's the causation? We also introduced a new math curriculum. That's much more, you may have heard about, we introduced a new math curriculum and a new ELA curriculum coming out of COVID. And this is the first year of real, last year they started to implement the math program. This is the first year of real implementation. The growth scores at Whately were, they went from the 55th percentile nationally normed in September to the 71st percentile. This means that the school growth is in the 79th percentile overall, meaning above average improvement in achievement scores. We actually wrote the company because we didn't, in our saying, are we reading this correctly? And she says, please send me what you're doing with your students. Because that is a significant growth, and that's across all the grades. With, you know, 3rd grade doesn't have a benchmark score, so they don't have the growth, but they are, all the grades have seen whatever. But is it the interventionist who's working with 20 students? It's gotta be helping. Is it the new curriculum? I can't peel that apart with this, so I'm being honest about that in the sense of whatever, but we are seeing a significant improvement in those scores, so. It has made an impact. We're gonna share that with school committee, and it's gonna be discussed at the public hearing on the budget.
Yep.
And remember, at the hearing, the budget can come down, so we just can't bring it up, so they asked us to stick it in there, let's have that conversation. And they asked us to give that information, so again, that's a $30,000 position, so it would lower your budget, that budget by 1.5%.
Okay, very good, and don't want to answer to this now, but it's coming at the public hearing, so it might be something that if Frontier Regional High School student, to educate that student is $20,000 a year, why would we take a student for 5,000 school of choice? You don't have to answer that now, but that's,
All right,
you know, the math isn't there.
right.
Or if the math is there, then somewhere along the line, we're fooling ourselves.
Right.
So,
I will be prepared to answer that question.
okay, I'll be there. All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And,
I have a question. I know, I don't speak up too often.
you are up while the man is still here.
Where do our 6th graders rate scholastically when they enter the 7th grade at the Frontier Regional? I know that we have 4 towns.
Right.
Where do they rate scholastic?
Whately students,
Yes.
you cannot So what we've done in our district, is that we have a curriculum coordinator. And even though we're 4 separate districts, we act as one. So if there is grade level meetings. If Whately would be the 3rd grade teacher, they actually all go and meet with all the 3rd grade teachers from all 4 towns. So they make sure that the curriculum is streamlined the same in all 4 towns. And so, I would say Whately is at, if not above, scholastically, the other 4 towns. So it's
Great.
coming in.
I have experienced through Hampshire Region. And also found out that Williamsburg had the highest budget, but the lowest scholastically approved children.
Hampshire Regional is set up the same way we are, but they do not have that central organization where the schools have to work together.
And a
They will
graduate-
when they want to, but they have to work together.
And a graduate told me the other day that she was screwed by the grades that they were teaching in the grade schools. So I'm just hoping that our kids are right up
Yeah,
on top.
kids are doing great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are we good? Darius, thank you very much for giving us a peek at 63% of our budget. Is it that much now? No, it's close.
62.
62. Okay.
All right, again, if you have questions or that kind of follow, please let us know.
Will do.
Us to, let school committee is looking for your thoughts on that too, so.
Thank you, school committee members, for coming in and being part of the meeting.
So you guys just get it based on tuition, you get the tuition.
When we're not, though, Paul, we're still, we've got 2 more things to do.
I Smith vote. I thought this was-
So they can go through our guidance office.
We're not gonna do that. No, we're just gonna do,
And
we've
then
got a reserve fund transfer,
give them technical.
and we're gonna discuss the annual finance committee.
Okay, are we done?
If you guys.
Yeah, the select
Board, motion to adjourn the select board meeting.
Second. All those in favor? Oh, no, wait.
Roll call.
Roll call. Joyce? Fred?
Yes.
Julie? Yes. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for coming. Another great meeting.
You're the wind.
All right, so we're just,
2 minor,
we got 2 minor things.
minor
that
things.
we have to knock off.
You'll remember the special town meeting that we just had in the fall. We had a prior year bill from the Board of Assessors at $450. My request was to fund that with free cash.
People watching.
Put my furniture back.
Thank you.
I'm gonna take this home with me.
Yeah, thank you.
Not in the budget.
Holds up really nice,
The request
Okay.
was to fund that from free cash.
right?
The FinCom, however, during that meeting, changed that to a reserve fund use of funds.
Yes.
Under municipal finance, the town meeting is not the authority to appropriate out of reserve funds, only you guys are. So essentially it's coming back to you. Since you wanted to do it out of reserve funds, that's fine, but you need to make the vote, not town meeting. So it's just to go and say, yes, take the 450. You already did kind of do this, but I need a
Yeah.
formal vote. Yeah,
And you need us to sign.
yeah, I have it here.
All right, so, we have a motion? Yes, we have a motion.
Second.
I move. The motion has been moved that we, the amount requested $450, transfer from the reserve fund to meet the needs of, the Board of Assessors. Okay, roll call.
Yes.
Paul, yes.
Here, yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
So you'll just, each one of you will find the line.
Are we done here?
Then the last item is, the 2024 annual report. every committee has to provide an annual report. The annual report needs to go and recollect what you did over that last calendar year. It's based on the calendar year, not the fiscal year. And so I did draft that, and I, based on your previous structure, provided what was recommended last year for the FY 25, what budget, what capital projects you had proposed and move forward, recommendations on stabilization usage. Basically, it's just a confirmation of what you voted on. And what you-
I saw it, I read it, it makes sense, do we need to vote that?
It would, yeah,
It would be, okay.
I wrote it, but I'd like you to say you're okay with it.
Do we have a motion?
I move that we
Approve.
accept or take a vote. Whatever it's called.
Everybody's checked out.
The Finance Committee report from 2024.
Thank you.
Do I have a second?
Second,
Drew, second, okay, we need to vote. Ruth?
yes.
Yes. Paul? Paul, yes.
Yes.
We weren't
Yes.
here, I wasn't here,
You weren't here.
so how can I go?
Then,
That's right.
then you have
Well-
to abstain.
Abstain.
But we still have
And
a
I
quorum.
abstain.
We still have a quorum,
We still
1,
have a
2, 3,
quorum.
4.
We have
As
three
long as
out of five.
we're still gonna be voting.
That's right. I wasn't here.
Oh, you weren't here.
Yeah.
So you,
Dan.
I wasn't
JG
here.
was at, JG
You
was,
weren't here either.
I
so
don't,
you don't.
you don't have to be on the committee. You're just saying that, yes, the committee did those things, not I did them. You're saying that the committee did do this work.
I think it's okay to do it
Yeah.
now as is.
Yeah,
We have,
Yeah.
yeah,
We did it.
so,
Okay.
I know that.
yeah. We don't need a quorum, so.
yeah, technically you don't need a vote. I would just like.
Was a good year.
Move to adjourn?
Yes, I make a
I moved
motion.
to adjourn.
Second.
Yay,
Yay.
yay, yay, yay.
Yes.
We're all in.